Okay, Chairman, thank you. We're now live.
Thank you very much. Welcome to a virtual meeting of the Standards Committee at the London Borough of Hillingdon. This virtual meeting is also being broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor John Riley and I'm the chairman of this committee. A few housekeeping notes, please. Before we start, some important online housekeeping notes for everyone present. Please ensure that any mobile phones around you are on silent and that any home listening devices, Alexa, etc. are turned off. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking and then unmute to speak. As chairman, I will call on those to speak during the course of the meeting. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of any time, lost connection or anything else like that, I will continue the meeting unless we are not quorate, which in this case is 3 councillors. I shall now ask for an attendance call before we move to the agenda. So I'll do a roll call of the councillors and others present to confirm attendance. Please indicate you are present when I say your name. Councillor Nick Dennis.
I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Bridges.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Janet Duncan.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. The Borough Solicitor, Raja Lager.
Yeah, good evening all, I'm present.
I knew you were there. And Head of Democratic Services, Lloyd White.
Thank you, Chairman. I am present.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the meeting that hasn't been mentioned? I don't think so. Thank you all. All right, we'll move to the agenda now. Apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have none. All members are present.
Thank you very much. The next item, I continue to receive and agree the minutes of the meetings on the 3rd of March 2020 and the 14th of May 2020. I'm going to take silence as agreement unless anyone indicates.
Agreed, Chairman.
Happy to agree.
All right, thank you very much. We can now go on. Those minutes are agreed. Lloyd, thank you very much. Then we go on to declarations of interest in any matters before this meeting. No. All right, thank you. All items are marked in part 1 will be considered in public, those in part 2 in private, but I don't think we've got any part 2 matters. So we go to item 5, which is the standards and ethics indicators for 2020. Lloyd, anything that you need to pick up for us as far as this is concerned?
Oh, Chairman, members will recall, or perhaps will be told for the first time, that a number of years ago the council decided a range of standards and ethics indicators which the Standards Committee was asked to monitor annually by way of just keeping an eye on the sort of ethical health of the authority. These are listed in the summary and then in more detail below. The first 3, there were nothing to report in 2020. This covers the calendar year 2020. Employment tribunal cases are listed there. There were a few of those in 2020. Then we move on to officer declarations, both in council contracts and in gifts and hospitality. Then we move on to member declarations on item 6. So we've listed out over, of course, a few pages all the member declarations that were made at council meetings during the course of the year. And then on page 11, the members' declarations of gifts and hospitality during 2020. And then finally, Chairman, section 7 is the Stage 3 and Ombudsman complaints received and settled during 2020. One thing I think I would just highlight is that which I can only imagine to be a cause of us all working from home and being in lockdown and nobody being out, that very much reduced amounts of returns on all of these, especially on sort of gifts and hospitality front. And that is also reflected here, and if I might just say, we normally at this meeting would have a part 2 report detailing complaints that were received about members during the calendar year. We actually had 0 complaints alleging breaches of the code of conduct against members during the 2020 year. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or if Mr. Allar wants to add to any of that.
May I just say one thing, Chairman? Standards for Public Life contacted a number of local authorities asking to see the code of conduct for members, which they had adopted, and they wanted to see a list of all the complaints that had been made and how they were dealt with. And I responded on behalf of the council after speaking to Lloyd and the chief executive, and we actually reported that everything was working really well at Hillingdon, that there was a real absence of complaints, because what they were trying to do was that they had made a number of recommendations about changes to the code of conduct. I think there are 8 or 9 recommendations, and I wrote to them and said, well, we're not going to adopt any of those recommendations because things work well at Hillingdon. We are unique. We have a WIPS protocol which works very well in practice, and it actually acts as a gatekeeper, and means that a lot of complaints actually fall away because they are dealt with through that informal process. I mean, contrast the position a few years ago where we had sort of complaints against members, made all the time. So, I mean, I've been borough solicitor here for 21 years now, and I will touch wood when I say this, but I think the standards of behaviour amongst members has never been better. It's really, really good. And I did send Standards for Public Life a copy of our WIPS protocol, and rather cheekily recommended that perhaps other authorities should adopt something similar. So just a little bit of anecdotal information just to let you know that there had been some interest from Standards for Public Life, but we batted them away and said things are all well at Hillingdon on the ethics front.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was very, very helpful, because even in my earliest time as being chairman of this committee, I think we were still just under the old system, and it was peppered with I wouldn't even say complaints in some respects, but observations to and fro sort of thing, and we wanted to get away from that. And we have, and I think you're right that standards have got much better, or at least the system is very good for dealing with all sorts of issues. I mean, the only thing I would say is that looking back over these reports, and even under the ombudsman settlements, I mean, obviously each individual one is important, but it's very pleasing to note the level and nature of them in that sense, and the way in which they've been dealt with, and the observations that are made about each one. I think if there were a hierarchy of seriousness, these would fall into very much, I get the impression, the lower bracket, which is extremely good and a good thing to have seen. All right, and does any member have any comments or any questions to either?
Yes, Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment if I may.
Councillor Dennis, yeah.
First of all, I'd just like to say this is one meeting each year when I come to, I really hope is boring, and to be honest, there's very little of interest in this meeting. So if you're watching on YouTube, I do apologise, but that's actually a brilliant result. There's absolutely nothing on standing orders in here, so which is a very refreshing thing in local government nowadays. But my one sort of comment, which is more of a comment really for the officers to take away, I don't expect them to sort of necessarily comment or answer it because it might not be appropriate to do so, but I'm looking at the employment tribunal cases that had been lodged, and the final bullet point suggests in 2020 there was a bunch of not very many ET cases, which is very obviously because we employ so many people, but I've noticed that race discrimination and disability discrimination gets mentioned a couple of times. Now, obviously the council employs thousands of people across many different areas. I mean, if this is concentrated in a single area, then you sort of think, okay, is there something we can look at, even if the cases legally might not be, not to prejudice the legal outcome, but if the cases are obviously spread out across all the areas, then it really is the thin end of the wedge. So I just, I would hope that they have the ability to sort of pick up on these things if they think they are concentrated and look at them. So that's my only comment, really.
All right, thank you.
I mean, Chairman, if I may respond briefly, I think that there has been more in the way of these types of claims in recent years. I mean, unfair dismissal is the usual type of claim brought in the employment tribunal, but I think there is now a certain attractiveness of bringing race and disability claims, and I'm not trying to underplay them and say that they have no merit, but people often add them onto their claim because if they are successful, they can obtain unlimited damages from the employment tribunal. That's what makes them attractive. With unfair dismissal, there is a ceiling on the award that can be made by the tribunal, so people often throw in these discrimination claims as a way of bolstering their case, and also, dare I say it, as a tactical sort of nous in terms of trying to get settlement as well. Just those are just my sort of brief observations about that.
All right, thank you. But in general terms, I'm sure you'll both take away Councillor Dennis's comments. All right, any other observations, comments, questions?
Yes, if I could just ask, Chairman, quite a few of the Ombudsman cases relate to housing, homelessness, and the way matters were handled. Is this an issue where we need to improve training or process in any way? Do we need to look at anything to perhaps help with that, or these there's no sort of consistent thing that we could address here?
Lloyd?
I was only going to say, Chairman, obviously we don't have the exact details of each of these because we anonymise all of these complaints. I am aware that the people handling the complaints, and certainly in each team, wherever they relate to, do get feedback from each of these and look for whether they're individual one-off cases or whether there is a, something more systemic in fault within the council system. Obviously, I can't possibly comment on these tonight, but I can certainly feed that comment back to the officers and say this was the members' comments from the committee to say, can we be assured that there is, notice taken of these cases, and just in case there's something more fundamental at play here.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be helpful, because I know it says things like, oh, the council apologised or the council agreed this, but it may be that there are other things the council could do, like, looking at its systems afresh or training needs. And that's the only reason I raise it. And I thank Councillor Dennis for raising the issue about race and disability. I was aware of the unlimited damages matter, so yeah, I can understand how people might bring that in if they think it would enhance the claim.
All right, thank you. Any other observations, questions, or comments? All right.
Councillor Bridges, Chairman.
Oh, hello, Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just simply observe the changes made in recent years following the recommendations by the Corporate Services Committee in the way that complaints are dealt with. Before we would go through a channel of different departments and levels within the council, whereas now we simply, I think it's at stage level 2, refer them straight to the Ombudsman. So I'm quite pleased to see that 67 complaints, in comparison to the amount of complaints we get in general within the council, have to some extent been dealt with informally, and the ones that have gone to the Ombudsman, the majority have not been investigated or indeed not upheld. So I think it's fairly positive news. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Chairman, if I might just comment that, Councillor Bridges is quite right. This was Cabinet acting on the POC's recommendations. You'll notice that the last 3 years, in fact the last 4 years, there's only been one stage 3 complaint, because what we found were happening was that the chief executive, which was stage 3, was obviously just upholding the stage 2, which was the director, and so we streamlined this greatly. And I think it's quite right to point out that there were only 67 complaints to the Ombudsman last year, of which 33 and 19 were either not upheld or not worthy of investigation. So we're still doing very well on these figures.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that we're aiming to be more careful or drill down on certain things, even though it's across a cohort that is relatively low, and it is low, and my recollection from other authorities is extremely low. It is still a good sign of our commitment to keeping high standards.
Chairman, right. Could I just ask another question, really? I know that we had few complaints last year, and of course with the pandemic people were concentrating on other things in their lives and services were disrupted. Did any of the complaints that we had relate to any COVID issues? I know that early on in the lockdown that we had starting last March, that people contacted us, I'm sure they contacted other councillors, about trying to get access to some of the services that we were coordinating through H for All. And I don't know if there were early sort of teething problems in that and they got sorted out, or what the case is. Do we have any information about that? Because I mean, there's still people who are being supported through services. I know it's a year on, and you know most things have got sorted out. But
I think that I mean, I had quite a lot to do with some of the services at the very start of the lockdown and the pandemic. And whilst it's true that Hillingdon for All were sort of taken up the cudgels because they were the go-to organisation, they were very quickly, I think, overwhelmed because their usual customer base, if I can put it like that, it is of a certain number, and suddenly they were having to deal with meds deliveries, food deliveries, let alone their own normal operation. And they're only a relatively small organisation, and quite quickly and a lot more people were drafted in to help. So there would have been a bit of a hiatus at the beginning because it was also unexpected, of course. And then essentially the council took over with a much bigger operation, and of course a lot of council employees, and it ought to go on record that we're very thankful to them for everything that they did. That a lot of council employees were redeployed to those services. So I'm not aware, as chairman, of any complaints in relation to our response to the pandemic. I don't know if either Lloyd or Raj are, but certainly that seemed to me to be the direction of travel from the start.
Yes, Chairman, I might be able to help. As you know, I was also quite heavily involved in the early stages with the council hub. That level of complaint obviously wouldn't reach this body because they would be very much known as stage 1 complaints that would be dealt with at the time. And in fact, the nature of the complaints we would be receiving at that time were literally, I didn't get my food order today, or I can't get out, and that sort of thing. So they wouldn't have been complaints that necessarily would have been recorded through the formal complaints procedure anyway, because they were very much we need to sort that now type complaints.
It was probably more kind of observation that led to a quick task and finish.
Yeah, absolutely. When the council was working very closely with the colleagues in Hillingdon for All, and obviously staff here. So I don't have that tonight, but and whether you could call them complaint or actually just comments on service delivery that we were trying to achieve at that time. So they certainly wouldn't have made it through to this level of complaint.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I think looking at the I don't think there's any other comments or questions or observations. So that brings us to the end of to the end of the agenda, rather. There isn't any other business items. So unless anybody does have anything further that they want to bring, is the end of the meeting. So thank you to the members of the public watching on YouTube. And will councillors please stand by and remain on mute until Lloyd White has confirmed that the live broadcast has ended. Thank you.